We're rolling.
Cool. Good to see you all this morning. Good morning, everyone. Today, what gives you peace? I want to talk today about a really interesting line from the Gospel of John, where Jesus says to his disciples, I give you peace, not the way the world gives peace. And I want to talk about A, what he means by that, and B, what do we do when we need to get a little peace from a chaotic, crazy outside world? And so, two questions that we'll be playing with a lot today. What does Jesus mean by peace? And again, what do we do to get a little peace? And so we'll be talking about that. All right, song of the morning, beginning song, I should say. Old favorite, we do it this month. So woke up this morning. Please feel free to join. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on Jesus. Woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on the Lord. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on Jesus. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Ain't no harm in keeping my mind, keeping it stayed on Jesus. Ain't no harm in keeping my mind, keeping it stayed on the Lord. Ain't no harm in keeping my mind, keeping it stayed on Jesus. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm walking and talking with my mind, keeping it stayed on Jesus. Walking and talking with my mind, keeping it stayed on the Lord. Walking and talking with my mind, keeping it stayed on Jesus. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Singing and praying. I'm singing and praying with my mind, keeping it stayed on Jesus. Singing and praying with my mind, keeping it stayed on the Lord. I'm singing and praying with my mind, keeping it stayed on Jesus. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Jane, do I have to send you to the principal's office or something like that? I don't know if we have one of those in church, but
I don't know, just I do need them.
all right. Couple.
If he's got a stick. Years ago, that principal's had stick.
I don't have a stick. Don't have to spread the rumor that I'm hitting encouragement with a stick. I remind you, these services are recorded. The last thing I need is the rumor that I'm hitting people with a stick.
Sorry.
It's all good.
I never got some pictures in my head. Now the stick's coming home.
All right.
Patty and Rusty.
We got a couple of prayers to bring up this morning. Definitely one of them is for our own Patty Arm. And I was told later you might have Patty come in our conversation via speakerphone here.
Yeah,
So,
he said, don't be putting me on film. Just call me and put me on speaker.
all right, Sarah, fair enough. So we will be chatting with her later, but I would like to keep Patty in our prayers. There's been a lot going on with the Harm family, as you know, since Rusty's son Tracy's passing. There's been a lot going on. Today, last night there was a celebration of life for him up in Eau Claire, and
And Patty.
yeah, well, and with all the planning and stuff like that, I personally just fear Pat, may have overdone it a bit, and so she's in the hospital with pneumonia, and so I'd like us to keep him in our prayers, and then hopefully Patty's feeling a little better soon.
And most likely going home tomorrow.
Yeah, it looks
Well,
yeah,
good for her.
it looks like it's
She
just
needs,
yeah,
she couldn't go today to go home alone.
fair enough. So okay.
Yeah, that whole family.
And so, 3, 2, 1. All right, so today's service is all about people who are late for church and what do we do there. Hey there, you
Now you can get the stick off.
What? Come on in, it's great to see you.
More than me.
She needed a wonderful, come on in.
I thought
didn't
you were
know
going to
if
be
we
gone for 2 weeks.
Is that right?
I thought you were on track.
Great to see you. Come on in, make yourself
It's nice to
comfortable.
see you.
Yeah, make yourself
Are you
comfortable.
alone?
We stand back a little or front a little.
Oh, you're fine. Go
No,
ahead.
you're good. Go for it. Have a seat. Make yourself comfortable.
Gotta turn our phone.
I do too. Thank you. If you remember, what is it? Easter. I had a phone call right at the beginning of the service, so I'll turn that
I
down.
can't remember
I
that.
love mine on a credit card. That's a
All right. Good deal. So welcome back. How was your sojourn, Travis?
Yeah.
How did it all go?
Let's talk about that at a different time.
We-
It's okay.
Okay, we'll talk about that different week. All right, fair enough. So anyway, we were just bringing up that we need to keep Patty in our prayers.
Oh.
She's in the hospital with pneumonia.
Oh.
Well, she'll be going home soon. So I think.
At least it's recognizable.
Yeah. Well, it's that, and my biggest fear is that with the death of her stepson Tracy, there's
Oh, yeah.
So Rusty is up with the family having I assume an appropriate celebration of Tracy's life would have been a party going late into the night on Saturday night, so Rusty's up there with family and Patty's here, and which is fine. Jane's been allowed to visit quite a bit, so she's had some time to visit with her during this time, to make sure she's not alone. Yeah. So.
Because the party was no player.
Yeah. So.
Well, and I remember her saying that they had a room booked for the
Yep.
last night,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
Where the celebration light was.
Not praying for you.
Well, this is honestly some good prayers here. Jen has found, and again, knock on wood on this one, but Jen has found some certain regimens to assist with some of the tenseness and pain that has been in her leg, and so far it's doing wonders. So we are really happy.
I think about you. I mean, I'm thinking about you praying for you too. But just when you know.
So
It's good that you found something that helps.
Yeah, it's just so difficult.
the key prayers that it keeps doing well. Honestly, a month of not going to the hospital is really awesome. And because I remember there was a time back there when I couldn't get through a week without hearing about you going to the ER. And
So,
so,
and
yeah.
Beth, you're okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
And you, Jane?
I got good news, and I want to share it with the group, and everyone else knows but you because you're late. So go
No bad news.
No, that's good news. Essentially, I got offered a new job. So it's in Winona. So but it's going to allow me some more. It's basically on Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 sort of thing, and I'll get some phone calls and deal with it. But long story short, I think I will have a little more time to work on things like special music projects and.
Yeah, but you're gonna like your job.
Am I gonna like it?
Yeah.
I hope so.
What is it?
I am basically it's working for Winona Monument, and I will be selling monuments.
The site's still on it?
No, it got bought out by a company in St. Cloud called Sunburst
Okay.
Memorials. So long story short, I will be working out of an office almost alone. There's one other guy that's part-time, and selling gravestones, memorials, things like that, monuments. So anyway, they wanted someone who had experience both in selling and experience helping people through time of loss.
Perfect, yeah.
But one thing that I think this will do is allow me a little more regular time for visiting with people, but also just a little more time to think about putting into the church and stuff like that. Really, the only reason we've been able to meet regular with all this stuff is Cassie's been doing more than her fair share of the work. And it's just, yeah. She really has. We want to thank you.
I know.
And so I'd like to pull a little more of my weight with this as I can, because as much as I like the work at Menards, and I'll say it, it's great work, it's great pension.
They kill you.
Well, that, and just, I've been averaging about 50 hours a week, which is not the end of the world, but it's hard to do a lot else when you do a physical job 50 hours a week. And so now I'm hoping a little more desk work, a little more energy.
And you have to be there. You have to have a physical presence at the place.
But yeah, for the most part, yeah. But that's what they're thinking, is that they actually moved locations. It used to be in the old downtown Winona,
Yeah.
and they moved to a spot right across from the Winona Mall. in there. So I'll be working with a really nice guy named Mike who's retirement age and is pulling back and going part-time.
And he could walk to Ocean Sushi.
Yeah, it's like Ken walked to a sushi place, which is
I know, that's a good place.
it's excellent. So,
Is it?
Yes.
but the thinking is, I with this, I'm really hoping to have a little more time for special projects, obviously music stuff and things like that. That I've been.
Well,
We've
we're
talked.
still gonna have church.
Of course, that's not nothing changes. As a matter of fact, I think I can come in
What
and
about those, that education we're gonna do?
that's a possibility too.
It's still,
Everything, and obviously with the job, I have to, it's a matter of how much I like down the road, whether it's just a new career and all that. But no, every education program that I was looking into was designed for working adults. They all, that's the way all, and Jane can back this up because their son did down this path. Right now in this area, all graduate programs for therapy are designed and assuming that you are working full-time while you're doing it. So, and this is a consistent full-time that I would know. So, more of a 9 to 5 as opposed to Menards where you're all over the map in terms of when you work.
Yeah.
So, yep. So that's what's happening with
So
me.
no more late nights and.
Yeah, no more closing till 9:30,
What-
being there
he
6
doesn't have to
o'clock.
work through you, so.
And he can get consistent sleep.
What's your hours?
It's currently 11 to 7.
So, no.
Yeah.
That means I gotta get home early and cook.
Yeah, and be done cooking by 7.
When you got back to the office, how many days did it take you to get sick?
Oh, no, not many.
Well, wait a minute. Now, technically, Cassidy didn't get sick. We now know.
No, before.
Before.
She just got rid of it. You guys
Yeah,
both.
Yeah.
I got it from him.
Don't blame me for that.
You're the one that got the head cold.
All right. So, any other prayers we'd like to lift up this morning? There's some good news floating around here. Keep Patty in our prayers as she recovers. And
Do you want to give her a call or should we do that later?
that's completely up to you. I assume we include her in our main conversation.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So we'll be. Yep.
As long as she's, didn't get too tuckered out, she can just let us know.
You look tired.
Yeah.
You are?
I took some pills yesterday that really brought me down, and then it's hard to get up from them.
Fair enough. All right. Well, in that case, we have our section. Odd questions from the internet. I didn't. Yeah, I have no knowledge of what this is going to be. Cassie would not tell me this time. So I will be seeing it with you and going from there.
And remember, as Christians, we get to go to heaven. What if you're not Christian? Well, you go to hell. Oh. But if you're born in a part of the world that was colonized by a different religion, then you're probably going to follow that religion. Do you think it's possible that the only reason why we're Christians is because we were born in a part of the world that was colonized by Christians? Oh no, we're different. We're doing it the right way.
Right.
And everyone else is wrong? So roughly 70% of the world will spend an eternity in hell? Unfortunately. But we get to go to heaven? Yeah. Because we were born here? God bless America.
Thank you very much, Cassie, for our controversial topic, but I would like to discuss it a little bit. Obviously, and I was taught a version of Christianity when I was young that essentially the ticket to heaven was and the official wording they used when I was young was declaring Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. So, now the $1 million question, and I know this is put forward with a little bit of humor and tongue-in-cheek, but the very serious question is, what is your feelings on a more classic notion that Christianity is the only way to heaven, and is where does God's grace fall in the middle of that, in the middle of a world where very astutely the person is saying certain people are raised in a very different religion because they're born and raised in a very different part of the world. What are your thoughts on this?
If that's God, then I don't want anything to do with that.
Well, it does,
I mean,
on the surface, smack of a certain unfair nature.
what she's saying is correct. I mean, it doesn't matter what religion, if you're, Muslim or if you're Jewish or you're all of these faiths. God isn't like that. He doesn't pick you, oh, you get to go to heaven, but you don't.
Ironically, we spoke a little bit about this last week in terms of my aunt, who basically served as my grandmother, went through a time when she had to help her kids understand Catholic school teaching that Protestants also were not going to heaven. And that was, obviously, it's an old one, I don't know what to talk to, but she was alive to read. Now, again, my aunt Hazel passed away a couple of years ago in her 90s, to get a frame of reference. But when her children were going to Catholic school, they were taught that Protestants weren't going to heaven. And remember, my aunt was raised Methodist and then married a Catholic gentleman and converted to the Catholic. So this idea of if you're not fill in the blank, you are not going is nothing new. I mean, it's clearly been around for a very long time. And so, what are your thoughts in general on what God does in the terms of inclusion or exclusion into such wonderful things like heaven?
I think it's got to be getting better if you can put something like that on YouTube.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think
Better, but what do you think
people
God
are
does with it?
a love instead of hate.
Fair enough. What do you think God does with all of this stuff?
Just shakes his head.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think that's awful cynical. I just don't see people responding to that well. You have your beliefs. And your beliefs are how you worship. And as long as you're worshiping and praising in your own way, that's all that should matter.
So what if you grew up not believing God or never taken to church? Is that your fault? You need to go to hell?
No. And I'm not going to say that that means you go to hell. There's 5 of us. I'm the only one that attends church. And my parents didn't attend church very often. And if I believe that, I would believe that my parents and my siblings will all go to hell, and I don't believe that.
It opens up a quagmire question. I'm sorry, I didn't you first.
Well, I really think, I really like the idea, is it the Hindus, the reborn, until you attain a higher level of being, is really more realistic to what we're here for. I
Yeah, for
don't think it's a one-shot deal.
For both Hinduism and Buddhism, and this is comes out of the Indian tradition, we just live over and over and over again. And for that religion, that's not a good thing. In other words,
No,
you get another chance, but there's also within that belief system the idea that you just keep living and living, but without a certain enlightenment, you just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And instead of just one lifetime to screw up, you now have several to keep making the same mistakes over and over
Right,
again.
you've got a goal still of enlightenment.
Yes, and a lot more time to do it in some ways, but also the feeling that if you don't, there's a term in the Buddhist faith called samsara, and that essentially means making the same mistakes over and over and over again. That's that frustration. You ever meet someone or actually deal with, like, you make a mistake or do something and you say, my God, I've been doing this since I was a kid?
Yeah.
It's the same thing for them, only over lifetimes. And then the idea is that without a direct enlightenment, you just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And so it's an interesting way to look at it. And
But I'm talking about growing. I mean, we're growing as people, we're growing in our religion or our faith or our families or all of that. You're continually changing and growing. And I think your faith grows with you. Or doesn't.
yeah, within any thought system or within the Buddhist Hindu stuff, the idea of how much do we really grow is the question. In other words, of course we change, but and that varies from person to person. Some people really do learn and grow, and let's face it, we've all known somebody who is essentially making the same general set of decisions that they were 30, 40 years prior. And so that's the idea that's carrying into all deals with I mean, in Western thought, even though we believe in Christianity, we only have one life to live, we still feel that way. You know, oh, Bob did that same thing again. God, he's been making those dumb decisions since he was a kid. Things like that. And we say things.
As long as you worship, it doesn't matter how you worship. Or where you where.
What is your...
Great barn. I mean, that's just it. It doesn't matter where you live or where you are or what religion you are or anything.
Well,
It's got to come from a place of love because that's what God does.
what's very interesting is that this push in Christianity, this feeling in Christianity, I think we've all bumped into at some point, a clear defining moment whereby you get into heaven, that you are a Christian. But this, I mean, and you've often heard Christians talk like this. Tell me the moment that you were saved, things like that. This really ultimately comes from Martin Luther, who wanted absolute, sure knowledge that he was going to heaven. And so he ends up coming out that the only way to know you're going to heaven is faith in Jesus Christ, which brings up the dilemma they talked about here. The issue, though, is that Martin Luther, as a thinker, needed to clearly define what gets you to heaven because deep down he had a deep fear, because he had rebelled against the Catholic Church, that he needed a way to define what gets you to heaven. For instance, what he had done in the eyes of the Catholic Church was going straight to hell. He said you do not now need to worship in a Catholic Church to be saved. You do not need to follow the teachings of the Pope, and God still loves you. He broke away from something that was considered the gateway to heaven. I want to tell you a story. I once won a trip to England. I spent a week there. One of the things I saw was the cathedral at Salisbury, and it was an amazing thing. So I walked in, and the stained glass in the wall was just breathtaking. But the tour guide said something fascinating to me that I'll never forget. He said, okay, you seem very impressed with this place. And I want you to imagine that you are a medieval peasant. The number of images, in other words, you in the world, you will see more human-made images than they will see in their lifetime. They have a very simple life. They do not read. So any knowledge they have. Now imagine you walk into this building. You will probably believe that God actually lives in this building. And this is the way to find God. And in many ways, in the old Catholic Church, there was no coming to God except through that building. And often made breathtaking. I mean, breathtaking to us.
Absolutely.
And beyond breathtaking to a medieval farmer. And so that was the idea, was there's God in that building, you go there, the priest tells you what to do, and that's how you get to heaven. Martin Luther has a little bit of that, but now he's no longer in that building. He's making different buildings because he's Protestant now, and he's been kicked out of the Catholic Church. And so now he's focusing his faith in Jesus, and that alone that gets you there. But it's very interesting that
He got upstairs in the building, those buildings, and he found out what was going on upstairs.
Oh, and yeah, I mean, we talked about that a little bit a couple weeks ago. The idea of some of the corruption in the Catholic Church is what really inspired him to originally challenge those corruptions, but that got him thrown out. But the idea was, and here's the other thing, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. If you don't need to go to a Catholic church to get into heaven, and that was a big thing for Martin Luther, then if you don't need to be in a Catholic church, well, maybe you can be in another church. But do you need to be in a church? And what is a church? Is a bar where people meet to worship a church. And can that now be a way to God? And now, what else is there? In other words, do people who genuinely worship a faith that they were taught because they were brought up in a very different part of the world, does God also hear those prayers? And that's the modern question. And one I don't think Martin Luther fully answered for us, nor is it a perfect answer in Paul. The idea is God not listening if you are born into a different faith but are still earnestly praying to something you don't fully understand, just like Christians do? And that is the million-dollar question. And I think many modern Christians, or at least some liberal ones, like myself included, fall on the side of God's pretty smart and can figure out when people are, well, and that's a big difference. I have always been weary, personally, of seeing God like an IRS agent. And then what do I mean by that? You can often go to an IRS person and be like, I've paid my taxes, here's the form, here's the thing, here it all is. I've done my best to give what I need to give to the government. And IRS agent,
And in fear.
fear, a little bit of fear, it's a good metaphor.
Fear God.
But not can very, oh, you signed the W-5 form, but I need you to sign the IR-6 form. This is not acceptable. Yeah, and I refuse to see God in that light. Oh, you worship vehemently, you try to be a good person, but I'm sorry, it wasn't the correct religion. And I personally have trouble seeing God in that light. I just think God is smarter than that. But that's my own personal opinion. Others will vehemently disagree.
I do agree about your personal opinion though, because it's your personal experience. I mean, when I was growing up and moved to Menominee, we didn't go to church anymore. So if I was staying with a girlfriend, I went to their church. So I went to churches all over the place. And, you know, as far as religion's concerned, did I feel at home in the Baptist church when I'm being screamed at that I'm a sinner? And if I don't do this and this and this, I'm going to hell. I'm just screaming the whole hour. Is that coming from a place of love? Is that, you know, something that God would want emulated and want us to do? I don't think so. But it's a very personal journey for each person to be able to find their home. And that's all about.
I have been in worship services where I went through a culture shock. Like, I didn't feel at home, but I didn't want to say you're wrong. It was much more of a sense of not for me.
Yeah.
And I've walked out of places where I was like, that was interesting. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I interpreted the gasp as a brilliant thought.
I
want to
agree.
hear it.
I agree.
What was that?
And
You've been, so that gasp was, you have walked into a building, experienced a worship service, walked out and said, that's good for you, but I ain't coming back.
yeah, and I don't believe that he doesn't really want us to fear him. I don't believe in God-fearing cultures, but that's my belief. But, okay, now, my sister said that she doesn't attend church, but she still believes there's a God and that it's a good person and a good God, and that they, as long as they have their beliefs, and that'll be enough.
This is a brilliant part. Oh, so basically it starts off with Martin Luther saying, you don't need to walk into a Catholic church to get to heaven. But what if it goes to, okay, we don't have to go to the church. Maybe you don't need to go into a church at all. Maybe it can be a bar. What if you are so angry and hurt by organized religion? Can you have a faith without going to an organized faith? That may be an extension of the same thought, is what I was wondering. Yeah.
Isn't the 2 or more in my name?
What's this?
2 or more gathered in my name?
If 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am amongst you.
Yes.
Very good. I like this. It's not every day I got a Christian quote in the Bible. I like that. This is
okay. The most or the least we've ever had was last week. There was only 4 of us here.
Yeah. Good spirited 4, I'll give you that, but still.
But to me, it's not the building so much as it is the people that are inside it.
Yeah.
Huh?
This is me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Martin Luther was quick to point that out, that the early church wasn't a church building at all. It was people meeting in homes. And so, and his point was, you know, that people, that God was as much there as an ornate church. And so, yeah.
That was really part of Jewish tradition too. I mean, they were always Jews, they didn't always have buildings.
Yeah, and they had to go through a ironically, in 30 years after Jesus' death and resurrection, the great temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman army. Even though they technically, it was a sort of a mini civil war in and around Jerusalem. The Roman troops came, but for the Jewish people, the question became, where is God Because for a long time, Jewish people felt that God existed in the Great Temple. You go to other synagogues and like that. Now, when the Roman army destroyed that building, it became, for some, a crisis of faith. Where is God? And some would say that the Jewish sensibility became much more of wherever you gather and things like that because of what happened. So, a brilliant idea, yeah. That they were forced by violence to reconsider where God is. Cool, thanks, gang. Good job. I didn't think
We're not even on the topic.
we got a little distracted on an internet question, but it's a good internet question, so I like that. All right, let's jump to a song. I love to include a new song, but I also want to include an old hymn that's a favorite. A song called "Be Still My Soul" is definitely in the category of an old hymn that has stood the test of time. So let me grab this, and you guys feel free to join me here. Remember a moment where we have been forgiven and encouraged to find the strength to forgive others. A wonderful quote for this week. When we go back to the past and rake up all the troubles we've had, we end up reeling and staggering through life. Stability and peace of mind come by living in the moment. Let us pray. Oh God, today we remember that even at our worst, you have forgiven us and given us new life. Help us to share that gift with others around us. And let us continue our prayers in silence. Brothers and sisters, hear the good news. from 2 Corinthians. What we mean is that God was in Christ offering peace and forgiveness to the people of this world. And he has given us the work of sharing his message about peace. I think I can make it now. The pain is gone. All of those bad feelings have disappeared. Here is the rainbow I've been praying for. It's gonna be bright,
Bright,
sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright,
bright.
sunshiny day. And together, let us pray the prayer that Jesus taught to us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. All right, getting ready for the Bible story. I believe we should start off with a song here and then read the hymn. I want to share it, not so much more, it is a little more modern. It's a bluegrass tune. So, Jen would know this one well. She used to sing this one. Yeah, I'm kind of liking this one. So. A little different feel though. I'm going to have the lyrics here. I think I got them mostly memorized, but just in case. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about our troubles. You will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. And if you feel the prayer of turning, you can know that the fire's burning. You can find a little talk with Jesus, makes it right. I once was lost in sin, till Jesus took me in. Then a little light from heaven filled my soul. He filled my heart with love and wrote my name above. And just a little talk with Jesus makes me old. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about our troubles. We'll hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. If you feel a little prayer of turning, you'll know that the fire's burning. You can find a little talk with Jesus, makes it right. Sometimes my path looks drear without a ray of cheer. Then a cloud of dark will hide the light of day. Mists will sit in their eyes and hide the lonely skies. But just a little talk with Jesus clears the way. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about our troubles. You'll hear our faintest cry. We'll answer by and by. Feel a little prayer will turn. I'm gonna talk with Jesus, fix it right. But I may have doubts and fears, my eyes may fill with tears, but Jesus is a friend who watches day and night. I go to him in prayer, he knows my every care, and just a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Have a little talk with Jesus, tell him all about our troubles. We'll hear our faintest cry, we'll answer by and by. If you feel a little prayer of turning, you can know the fire's burning. You can find a little talk with Jesus, makes it right. You can find a little talk with Jesus, makes it right. Okay. So some of you know that tune well. Good to hear. Thought I'd change it up a little bit. Yeah, cool. I was wondering if James was going to break out the spoons there in a minute. All right, reading for this morning. And again, two questions I'm going to ask you. What does Jesus mean when he says he's going to give his disciples peace? And what do we do to achieve peace in our modern world? So, two questions. One is, now In all four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, at some point, Jesus says things to his disciples to prepare them for when Jesus won't physically be there. But in the Gospel of John, there's a particularly long section of it, where Jesus feels the need to tell them quite a bit because they are going to have to continue the ministry without him physically being there. He'll be there in spirit, but without him being able to say, no, you did it wrong, this is the way you should do it. And so, and this talk comes shortly before he's arrested. And there's a number of things he brings up, but I want to focus today on this part, where he talks about peace. So from Gospel of John, it reads like this. Jesus replied, if anyone loves me, they will obey me, and then my Father will love them, and he will come to them and live in them. But anyone who doesn't love me won't obey me. What they have heard me say doesn't really come from me, but it comes from my Father who sent me. I have told you these things while I am still with you, but the Holy Spirit will come and help you, because the Father will send the Spirit to take my place. The Spirit will teach you everything, and will remind you of what I said while I was with you. I give you peace, the kind of peace that only I can give. It wasn't the peace that this world can give. So don't be worried or afraid. You have already heard me say that I am going and that I will also come back to you. If you really love me, you will be glad that I am going back to the Father, because he is greater than I am. I am telling you this before I leave, so that when it does happen, you will have faith in me. Cool. So our conversation this morning is about that, and if you want to take a moment, Jane, to give Patty a call, put her on speaker, and let's get her opinion on this. But the big thing, and the big thing I want to talk about is what does Jesus say?
Hey, Patty. Oh, she hung up. And I lost my fork. Hey. Oh. Well, my goodness, Patty, what are you doing in that hospital?
She could be in the bathroom.
My goodness,
not.
you're on speaker, girl.
Hey, Patty, great to have you with us. All right, today's topic, like I said,
Wait a minute, who's we got all together? Hi. You know who that is. Well, Mary Lou.
Hello.
There's Jen.
Hi, Betty.
Janina,
and
And
of course
Greg.
me.
Okay, so we've got you on speaker, and we're talking about what gives you peace.
So anyway, so Jesus specifically says to his disciples, I give you peace, not the peace the world gives. What on earth do you think he's talking about at that moment? It's a tough question. Eventually we'll ease on into our definition of peace here, now, and today. But why do you think, of all the things Jesus wants to talk about with his disciples, he needs to leave them a peace, and a peace different than what the world gives? And yes, if you often look at the Gospel of John and say, wow, that was confusing, of all the four Gospels, John is the poet. John is the one with the most mystical statements. So if you sit there kind of scratching your head over what he's talking about, that's okay. It's supposed to be that way. And in this, Jesus says, I leave you peace.
I think he's doing that so that the people don't feel abandoned when he's gone. He's telling them that the Spirit's still going to be with you, and all of the things that you've learned and everything. This is going to be a huge change, but have peace about it.
Okay?
This is what's supposed to happen.
So part of it is addressing fear that they're going to have. Fair enough. What else might
how
you
does
say?
peace translate?
How does it translate?
What was the?
Yeah, you want me to do an exegesis on that word?
Right.
No. It's good. No. I don't mean that word. I mean you caught me without doing my homework there. No, and so
It's a very vague word.
yes, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think John, the writer of John, is intentionally doing it that way. In other words, Jesus in the Gospel of John often speaks very cryptically, mystically. Remember, this is the book that starts out with a light has come into the world, and the world could not extinguish it. This is, and so, in other words, John is famous for lines that make you think. You mentioned before about the Buddhist Hindu tradition, They are very fond of lines where words that are put out there, and it makes no sense at first, but as you ponder in your head, I mean, Gospel of John is like that. And so, yeah, you're right, it's a vague word, and I think poetically and intentionally was meant to be vague. So, what do you think he's talking, and like I said, your guess is as good as mine with this. What do you think he's talking about when Jesus says, peace I give you? And this is as he's getting ready to physically leave them.
Got any thoughts, Patty?
Fair enough. We will play with this. It may be a simple matter of things are going to change in your world. Don't be afraid. I may not physically be here, but in spirit I'm here. Jesus specific in the Gospel of John, Jesus specifically talks about the Holy Spirit. He literally talks about it as a spirit that's going to replace him. So they're not alone, but things are changing. And I think in part, and this will maybe be where we transition to what we do with this, for Jesus, he wants the disciples to rise above their fear and to live in a certain faith. And he knows what a challenge this is. So let's transition to our world. What do we do to get peace in a world where things can be scary and change and stressful? The world may be very different than it was 2,000 years ago, but it still has as much worry and changes and stress. So, I'm going to throw the question into the Monarch. What do you do in your world today to achieve peace when you need it?
Patty, that would be cough syrup for you?
Peace?
Love medicine.
Loves the cough syrup. That brings you peace.
And getting pneumonia and ending up in the hospital because God's telling you you can't do everything by yourself.
Well, you did learn your lesson fast. That's
Yeah.
so true.
Patty is very fond of saying to me, whenever I get sick, that this is God's way of telling you to slow down for a bit. Like I said, Patty, I never wanted to be in the hospital, but I took great joy of saying that one back to you, so.
I know.
Other thoughts?
I couldn't have done it without my sister Jane and my two ministers.
Yes, the Kathy case.
Because, they had the memorial for Tracy yesterday, so I couldn't go to that.
I said we switched places. I was supposed to go there, and you were coming to me, and then I switched and came to you instead.
Yeah, and Rusty's coming this afternoon. So.
It's so good. I'm so glad. And everything went good?
Yeah.
Great.
What do we do in our modern world to find peace? And you're right, I'm leaving that word as vague as when we started. So peace can be anything from a relief from stress to alleviation of worry.
I think peace is that inner calm,
Yeah.
the internal, that's when it feels I'm at peace, if there's something inner and calm. And I think Jesus was preparing them for a rough future and telling them that this spirit is coming and that this inner feeling you have of peace, calm, and everything is going to be okay, maybe not in this life, but in the next, was what he was trying to convey. It's easier to go on if you have that inner spark or calm, or there's something untangible internally that is what gives you peace, in my book.
And that's so true, because there's people that don't believe anything unless it's tangible in the science world and other things like that. If it can't be explained, or there's pictures, or there's medical proof or whatever, then you don't believe in it. But I think because it's your inner strength and your inner peace, that to have that connection, even though.
And I always associate it with calm.
I know there's lots of people that do like meditations to get the peace.
Certain people find different practices And there's certain things that can be very grounding in a faith, especially in a chaotic world. One of the interesting things about the Muslim faith is that there are certain times of the day when you pray, and within Muslim countries, everyone stops what they're doing. And so, now obviously, and different Muslims interpret this differently if they're living, say, in the United States. But some will stop what they're doing in the middle of it. And there is something very grounding about that. The world may, within Muslim countries and within certain people of the Muslim faith, the world may change, the world may go nuts, but at this time of day, I will connect with God. There's something there's something I find really profound about that. And as much as I love my Christian faith with its sense of God is always there whenever you need, the notion of praying God at these specific times of the day, I find not only fascinating, but certainly has a sense of grounding and a peace that rises above the chaotic nature of the world. So
Like I
that's
said,
it.
with meditating, he didn't notice anybody else was there. He just was in his own moment.
And in many ways, it is rising above fears. And that's what Jesus specifically was talking about. Essentially, Jesus was saying in this rather long speech in the Gospel of John, your world's going to change. I'm going to be arrested, and things are going to, and the Spirit is here, but I'm not going to be teaching you the same way I have before. You are going to move from disciples, students, to teachers to other people. And I'm still with you, even though everything looks different. And I can relate to that because some people deal with change better than others. I'm not particularly good at that. And so when I deal with changes in the world, I have to find a peace that goes above that. So Patty, I'm going to ask you a question since you're sitting right here.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You ever pajamas?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Pajamas and all, Patty,
We
you're
could
asking.
all wear pajamas.
My question to you, Patty, is, in a chaotic world, what do you do in your life that finds peace?
Right.
Yeah, and praying can do that. Very interesting that it's coming across, even in a couple different faiths, about how to do that. But praying can actually kind of remind us of, and just sort of center us in that sense of peace. Thanks, Patty.
Anytime.
All right. Other thoughts? What do we do in the modern world to find peace that rises above a changing world that brings fear, nervousness, anxiety?
It's a tough year to be asking that question.
I thought for sure Patty was going to say that her bathtub.
Patty, you did not mention your bathtub in this moment of peace, but I told you.
She's got a bathtub that everybody wants.
I'm on my bathtub yet. I'll wait till I get home.
Patty's mentioned to us in conversation a sense of calm that comes with her bathtub, so we thought we'd bring that up.
Unless Rusty's using it.
No, I kick him out when I'm.
I figured.
All right, Janina over here.
Talking to somebody that I care about.
Yeah.
I'll often use the phone for that.
Yeah.
Even if we don't talk about what I really need to talk about, you kind of feel peace out.
Yeah.
Just having the friendship that you know you can rely on means a lot.
Yeah. That's hard to find somebody. I pick on my kids and they get tired of it.
Well, and I think
I gotta go.
and part of it is about trust. And if you're going to tell someone about the things that are, because honestly, the stuff that gets us anxious and worried in the world that we need to rise above, that's the tough stuff to talk about. And so finding people to talk about that with requires an amazing amount of trust. And that can be difficult to find.
This group here is really important.
Yeah, I find myself lucky enough to be surrounded by people that I do trust with things. I'm able to talk here in ways that in other groups in my life I may have not felt as comfortable talking.
This is the only church I've ever been to and love to be at, that the minister calls you when you're in the hospital during church to talk to you.
To get your don't get out of church that easy.
But I thank you for your prayers and your wishes, and I love you guys, and this is the best church that ever existed.
Well,
Thank you.
I love our church too.
Well, I'm glad you're here, Patty, and I really hope you go home soon and are feeling better.
I will call you when I'm home. Look out.
Are you gonna get some rest now?
Yeah,
Alrighty. I love you.
I love you too. Thanks for coming down, Sister Jane.
You're welcome. I'll break you out if you need me to.
I kind of get the feeling
Bye-bye.
that in Jesus' life was why the people flocked to him. Because his sermons were to them, and it was about things that they knew. And stories. And they could sit and listen.
And relate with it.
And relate, yeah, and get something.
The joy of the parable was the story around it was stuff that by and large, was about their lives.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence that there were so many parables about things like farming. And I think that's important. Religion can, at its worst, talk merely about God and not connect with people.
Doesn't in Matthew, he says the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of
Yes.
heaven is like. I can't remember the stories themselves.
No, there was a lot of them.
There
The kingdom
were.
of heaven is like a mustard seed that starts out as something very
Yeah.
small and grows to be a very large bush. And so the things that are above earth are talked about in a way that's very grounded.
So that says to us that the mustard seed is that we grow together or it spread.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
That's something that starts out so small, like a notion that we're not alone, that anything from, God doesn't really care about us, to, hey, why don't you join me to church tonight? Something so small can grow to be something so large. And that was, Jesus had a real, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, that Jesus had a particular gift of talking about things out there, philosophical and all that, in a way that was very grounded and people could relate to. And that is not, that's a gift. That is, I had an interesting conversation once. I've had two conversations that are polar opposites, and they're about funerals. And I'd like to talk about that. I did a couple funerals where people came to me afterwards, oh, thank you so much. You talked a lot about this person that I cared about that passed away, and I'm really grateful. Other churches don't do that. And I had a person once tell me, I don't give a darn about this person that passed away. I want to know about God. And so, two polar opposites about what to do at a moment of a funeral. Do you talk merely about God and how God saves us, or do you talk about what's unique and wonderful about that person and the time we got to share with them? And but I think in there is a similar idea. Do you talk about God as God is up there away from us, or as Jesus did, related the kingdom of heaven and God to things that we see every day? Now it's kind of neat. Reminded me of that conversation, or two conversations of amazing polar opposites about that. How do we achieve peace in a chaotic world? I want to play with that a little more before we end here.
We definitely have to fight for it,
Yeah.
to find our spot, our time.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it will come automatically without an intentional effort. And I think that's why Jesus is speaking to his disciples, because their peace is not going to automatically show up. They need to know they're not alone when they feel alone. Janet, your worst moments, how do you find peace? I'm kind of curious.
Pray and then talk with my friends and family and then just see what's going on and just kind of forget what my worries and talk to them and how they're doing.
And you create things.
Does that bring you peace? I'm kind of curious. You are very good with your hands in terms of art. Yeah, art, crafts, and all that. I'm kind of curious. curious, since you brought it up, does that ever bring you a sense of peace?
It does, because when I do that, I just forget about everything around me and just kind of relaxing to treat it.
And they give you joy too.
I would hope so. She spends a lot of time with it.
But then I don't give it to people.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of parts of getting joy. It's the final look at it and the sharing. And then, and when you study now, then you'll be studying about how people do this, because that's what people want.
Yeah. In many ways. I just was reminded of what an amazing feeling it was. I got homework from one of my interviews. No, in other words, one of the interviews was they talked to you about it, but then they sent you 3 case studies, and you're supposed to make down. But I remember working on those, and I haven't been so mentally stimulated in months, and it brought a real joy to do that. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I'm like, there was just I remember a certain huge feeling of, oh my God, I've missed this. So,
Oh, how wonderful.
yeah,
Learning feels good.
yeah, and for me, it can be, I need to remember, and this is very personal, to take moments to think abstractly and academically. Without that, I start to get
Yes,
Yeah.
that helps you.
very much so, yeah.
And wasn't the topic about repetitiveness or the things that bring you comfort in your life and how different that can be?
Like a schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
yeah,
you know,
that may be,
not doing the same type of
Yeah,
things, going to the same
yeah.
places can bring you that
Yeah.
peace.
yeah, and that, I don't know how it's very personal for me, that set schedules help. I may have inherited that one from Mom, because I tell people often that's one of the best things for her mental health was the nursing home and that schedule.
Yeah.
And that really, and I'm wondering if I didn't inherit a little bit of that, because the more I'm on a more set schedule, the more grounded I feel. And the more things are chaotic and willy-nilly, the more I feel, I don't know, Cassie, what's the word I'm looking for about that one?
We're good at putting out fires, talking to people at the same time, but
If he's kept on schedule, he's more bearable, I know that.
Bearable was not the word I was looking for, but I
know,
did
but
ask, so.
it's the first one that came to my mind.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So how about you?
Me, I find comfort and peace zoning out with television or taking a nap. I like nothing better when the world
Yeah.
goes to pot than to have
I
a
was
long
gonna
nap.
say that, but zoning out with TV.
Yeah, I find that very, very relaxing to just disengage in that way.
Go down some rabbit hole.
Yeah,
I watch murder shows at night so I can relax and have some peace.
yeah.
YouTube has become just,
All right, I intentionally, for all the future psychologists out there, I'm going to let go of the fact that she relaxes by murder shows. I will not invest. It's just too big a deal. But I acknowledge anyone judging me out there that it went off in my head. I just don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. Thank you. The fact that a murder show relaxes you, I'm just going to let this one go and move on. We all have our own methods.
Yeah, but who would you go to? You're very fun.
There are 2 people in my life who I think spend too much time watching reality murder shows, and the other one has been at this church on a number of occasions. So I love Heather Johnson, who's a good friend. I chat with her a lot. She also relaxes and takes comfort with the reality murder shows and things like that. I will let both of them go without further investigation because we
Wait a
really.
minute, yes, I have something to say about this.
I don't let him know.
Roll
I don't let him know.
Don't want to know.
with serial killers.
I don't want to know what's at the bottom of that well. I don't have that kind of time right now.
I like to think about what's in their mind.
I just want. We're not going any further down this. I've been very
Oh
clear.
my goodness, I'll listen to a podcast.
I I almost never shout orders, but I'm gonna do it this time.
Okay. Do you want to hear something that I find strange?
No.
Yes. Please, share.
I have a more even keel feeling
Mhm.
since I had my heart attack.
Really? Now that's not strange. That's fascinating. So
A
I'm
lot of
gonna
people have changes after they've had a heart attack. though. They
tell me
change
more.
So do you just not care about like all the horrors anymore?
Or that was so horrible that you really don't
Yeah.
have much.
Oh, I want to hear. I want to hear Mary tell me this one.
Yeah.
I feel at peace with lots of things, and I just kind of feel that everybody should feel this way. Everything will be fine, even if you aren't here.
Mhm.
Everything will be fine. And that part is kind of,
You can let go.
yes,
You sound like you've sort of made peace with your own ending too. If I'm not here,
yes,
that's okay because I'm at peace with them.
yes.
Oh,
I have
that is absolutely fascinating. So remember, we talked a little bit.
I still don't understand why I came back
Mm-hmm.
and how Winona did it.
that's a miracle in itself. I'll put that on film.
But I do have a sense of peace that everything's going to be okay. I don't know whether I'll be able to, my soul will be here to watch my grandkids and what they have come up with life. I'm very proud of what most of them have done already. And that's not the thing that'll upset me. The things that upset me is Brad's not finishing projects.
But that always bothered you.
Huh? Yes, that is.
Oh.
Because I just wanted to know before the heart attack, what brought you peace?
Okay, if I was doing a project, I've sewed a lot, and Janine knows what, and to take a piece of material, and then at the end of the day, you have a dress, or an outfit, or something, and the finished product gives you a good feeling, doesn't it? Just a big gratification.
Creation.
Yes. And why that doesn't do that to him is way beyond.
Fair enough. But
I go, don't you take pride in what you have accomplished? You know what I mean?
every once in a while, Mary Lou, you bring up 3 ideas in like 1 minute, and I could spend a whole day on any of them. So I'm not ignoring it, but
Huh?
Made a sense.
Good.
the one that fascinated me the most, though there was a couple of close seconds, was this notion that and I will classify it as a near-death experience because there is you actually technically died for a little
Yes, I
while.
did.
That has brought you an amazing peace.
Yeah.
And I
I
am
know that
fascinated
there's
with
nothing
it.
to fear.
That
There's
is.
nothing to fear.
That's a good saying, nothing to do with fear itself.
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and
I am-
I feel kind of that it might be a little bit.
He belongs to the National Guard, and the National Guard is now deploying. Almost all of the Guard is doing something, really. It's not like it used to be. And so he's went to Poland for a year, and it's kind of a scary thing.
But there's no war there, is there?
It's right next to
Yeah.
Ukraine, it's right next to Russia,
Poland is always.
and you can go, and then they can put troops there,
Yeah.
and they're peaceful.
And yet we